So, in this interview, I'm going to be talking with Robbie Sheerin. Robbie Sheerin is a seasoned professional with a diverse skill set, combining a strong background in manufacturing over 20 years. He has extensive experience in problem solving, continuous improvement, and efficiency techniques within the aerospace industry. Also, experience with GD&T, inspection, and a deep knowledge and understanding of various vision systems such as OGP, Keyence, Microview, and AccuGauge. He is also a passionate writer and is an award-winning Scottish author with works published in various online and paperback outlets. So, thanks for talking to me, Robin. Thanks for talking to me, Robbie. So the latest book you've written is about ISO 9001, ISO ways of thinking. Can you tell me what is the International Organization for Standardization, often called ISO?
Well, it's basically a organization made up of around 160 different members around the world. So each member is from their respective country, um, and they basically write IOS um, ISO standards. And what they do, they're made up of quality people and engineers and scientists. And what they do is they'll rotate 20 members, maybe yearly or every couple of years, and they'll get together and they'll brainstorm if the ISO standards need, adjusted, or if they need to make changes, or if they've seen something in their world that would be advantageous to add in, or any obstacles that they've seen, or even interactions with organizations or companies that have struggled with trying to meet the standard. They may discuss ways to implement it easier, or they'll basically review it to see if it needs a change, and they won't change it every year or every time they meet. But of course, the last update they had was 2015. That's where we're at now. So we'll see if there's any changes to the standard. But that's basically what ISO, the organization, is.
Okay. And by standard, you mean the 9001, correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yep,
And I'm sure ISO covers standards for all kind of things, pencil sharpeners and all that, but we'll probably just
yeah,
limit it to the 9001.
yeah.
So it's my understanding ISO is based in Europe and Switzerland. I think there's a perception, and maybe it's just me, that it's a European-based organization kind of telling other countries what to do. Um, is that true at all? Is it just false on my
Well,
part?
yeah, well, it is true. They are based in Europe, but the fact that they have over 150, 160 members from around the world, really makes it an international thing. It's kind of like, United Nations. United Nations isn't a European organization, it's a worldwide uh, organization, and that's what ISO is. So although it's based in Europe, it encapsulates all these other countries from around the world, and it's advantageous to be part of that in some way, so that we can work with and interact with these other countries when it comes to producing products or providing services.
Okay, that makes sense. Is the American Society of Quality, how does that fit into this whole matrix? It's not a sister, like a competing organization. Does it exist within ISO, or is it its own thing? What exactly is the purpose of the ASQ?
So basically, you have ISO, and then one of their members is the American National Society, Institute, something like that. So they're a member, they're the American member of ISO, and then under them is ASQ. So ASQ will go out and certify different companies to ISO, but they're kind of like the
Oh,
child of ANSI, and then ANSI kind of answers to ISO, if you like. Not answers to them, but they're kind of a member of that family. So it's kind of broken down.
okay, that makes sense. So ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, is probably the same way. I know it exists under ANSI, and there's probably a sister organization, ISO wise, for their drawing standards. And I guess it's just called ISO. It's just different numbers.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes a little bit more sense. So ISO is kind of at the top, and there's national, organizations that are probably cater more to, whichever country they're existing in.
Yeah. Right. And the ANSI will also, they have their own standards too, which some companies can choose to adhere to, or they have to. Um, but of course they're also part of that ISO. So it's not just ISO standards that ANSI um, require or push. They also preach their own standards for the United States, if you like. So
So, for our listeners that may not be sure what we're exactly talking about here, including me, what exactly is ISO 9001?
it's basically a structure or guidelines that can be put in place um, to make sure that a company makes quality products or provides quality services to their customer. That's basically what it is.
Okay. And it's my understanding that it's only like 27 pages long or something.
Yeah, yeah, yep, yep. It's right around there. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I don't want to say a constitution or something, but kind of like a law where it's vague. I don't want to say vague, but it's vaguely written, and you can kind of interpret it down. It has kind of mission statements, and you have a lot of free will. There's only so much you could
Hmm.
put in a 27-page document,
Yeah.
it seems.
Yeah, that's true. And it is open for interpretation. A lot of people will say that, and it can be a difficult thing sometimes discussing the standard with an auditor, because they may have their own interpretation of it. And there's been times where I've even uh, disagreed with an auditor, or I've said, "Well, show me in the standard where that is," and maybe they can't because it's their interpretation of it. I had one auditor bring up about calibrating ring gauges, and how often do you do that? And we said, well, we do it yearly, depending on the use of them. And he's like, well, where does it say in the standard about that? And it doesn't. It says that it's certain, intervals calibration equipment will be certified. And it's up to the company to determine when that's done. And of course, once you put that in your procedures, you have to follow through. But it is open to interpretation. And, there's even aspects of AS 9001 that don't apply to some companies. For instance, design is mentioned in AS 9001. Some companies don't do design work. They might just provide a service. Um, so again, the aspects of that standard wouldn't apply to them. So, like I said, it's just there's guidelines there and there's structure, but it doesn't get down, into the weeds as to how a company should make a product, basically.
Right. And it's been my understanding that a lot of it has to do with just documenting processes. You can't just make a product and ship it off. You've got to keep records, record
Yeah.
keeping, documents, processes. Is that more or less on the mark?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, everything needs to be documented, traceability. One of the main reasons for take it for example, traceability. If a customer ends up with a defective part, they want to be able to go back to their suppliers and find out when it started, um, why did it occur, what measurements were could have been put in place to avoid that. And without that traceability and that paperwork, that can't be done. So a customer wants the confidence that they can go back in history of that part and find out what caused the issue and when it began. Did it begin a year ago? Did we start getting defective parts a year ago? Or does this go back 10 years and maybe we have defective parts out in the field? So a customer can only figure that out if they have traceability. And that's why it's important that, companies who are ISO certified, part of that is traceability.
So does 9001 mean a company needs to use ISO engineering drawing standards?
No, absolutely not. Like I said, some companies only provide a service, or they're only making parts, and the customer's the one that provides a drawing. Or we talked earlier about CAD models. They're the ones that do all the designing. So just because you're ISO certified doesn't mean you have to use ISO drawing standards. However, in saying that, if you're an engineer or a designer, if suppliers or customers are using GD&T or the various technical drawing standards in another country, it's advantageous and wise for you to use that same language if you like. It makes sense, and you know, i- if I'm a designer and I put a diameter symbol on a drawing, and I want the top of the diameter to be this size, and I want the bottom of the diameter to be this size, and I want it this far from the side. I don't want to put all that in a paragraph on a drawing. I want to just put a
Right.
couple of symbols on there, so that the guy in an island in Scotland knows what I want from the product. And
Right.
it's kind of like a universal language, if you like. So even although knowing those standards and knowing GD&T um, isn't a requirement in ISO 9001, it's definitely part of it in that whole communication thing and being in that world, you know?
Right. And documentation, I assume,
Yeah,
is, they don't, I should probably know that in ISO 9001 better, but I'm sure it says, hey, your designs need to be documented, and they kind of
yeah,
let you choose how you're going to do that.
yeah, yeah. And of course, a customer can come in and change their drawing part way through you producing the part, which is a pain, but it can happen. But again, I've even seen customers come in, they change the drawing, but they haven't changed the rev. And that's an issue. It's like you're the customer, you should be on top of this stuff, but a lot of times a rev isn't changing. You have to go back and have them update the rev.
Right.
And that not only covers you as a company, but of course it covers the customer too, with all that documentation. And of course it'll get you a finding if during an audit. So
Right. All right. Well, my next question, I want to read a quote from your book. So lean ideology is another aspect of manufacturing, which often goes hand in hand with ISO. Some of the examples in this book are lean thinking. Lean is another powerful tool that can be used in part or in full in reducing or eliminating waste and improving efficiency. So my question is, why is a quality management system linked with lean? Isn't quality, and when I say quality, I'm also kind of thinking of safety. Is it isn't that separate from, generating revenue or, cutting costs?
well, the advantage with lean manufacturing is, like you say, it not only cuts costs and reduce waste, but there's certain aspect of lean manufacturing. For instance, order and cleanliness is part of that, and you can imagine how detrimental it may be to a product if it's contaminated, or if there's FOD on it, or if even parts are mixed up,
Right.
or even parts are assembled backwards. So you can see that using lean manufacturing actually assists in your making quality products. You can you reduce, of course, reducing scrap, reducing wasted time. Some companies will do a spaghetti chart, and they'll track people throughout a company over a day or over a week, and they'll see where that person's going, and you get this big jumble of spaghetti,
Right.
and then they decide, hey, you know, maybe we move the quality department to the middle of the building because people are walking needlessly to places they don't have to, or maybe the shipping department's in the wrong place. That's not always ideal because usually shipping's by a door, but you know, you want to reduce all that waste of people walking around because all those minutes and seconds adds up in a year. Um, and of course, that's waste that's just going out the door. And also, you know, having a clean work area, um, there isn't thing things don't get lost.
Right.
You can stay focused, and of course, all that stuff is needed to provide a quality product or service. You know, so it's definitely lean definitely goes hand in hand with ISO, any ISO standard, actually, just because of the practicality of it.
Interesting. So I guess the way I would put it from, 30,000-foot view is it just reduces chaos. I've worked jobs where I was in a shop and I swear I spent 80% of my day walking around looking for something,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were not running any kind of quality management or lean. And it's just wasted time. And that's time you could be checking out a product or doing whatever you need to do that day. And that results in, rushing and cutting corners, and that makes sense.
yeah. And even I worked at one company where they had pegboards, and the only tools that were on that pegboard were the tools the operators and machinists or assemblers needed. There
Right.
was no extra tools. Every station had the same tools, so you could basically move one person to another station and they would have everything they need there. You know, the tools were outlined so that if there's one missing, you know, just by looking at the board one was missing. And it goes back to that whole idea of, you know, where did I put that wrench or where did I put those micrometers? It's you know, you don't have to waste all that time looking for something. You know, I do it in my garage. I'm always looking for something because
Yeah.
I didn't put it in the right spot. My wife's like, why didn't you just put it back where you found it? So it's definitely a brain thing that can definitely and you know, it goes right down to maybe you have a secretary. You know, if they have a tidy table or tidy drawers, you know, they can find the stapler without looking under a bunch of files. You can apply lean to any kind of environment and it works.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah, I'm guilty of having a horrible office, just stuff everywhere. But I teach at a college, so college professors get a pass, I think.
All right, there you go.
I've I've seen, you go up to office hours with some of your instructors or whatever, and it's just like a hoarding situation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I've seen that a couple times. So you are a quality manager and have been for a long time. Do you think it's important for quality managers to have those practical skills, like actually measuring things, programming a CMM, that kind of background?
You know, it's not required, but it's definitely advantageous to have that background. You know, I see we talked earlier about a lot of engineers that don't know the basics of GD&T or they don't know how to measure something. They'll maybe they've come to me and said, you know, can you measure this? It's a drop indicator, and they don't know how to use a drop indicator.
Oh no.
And it's really sad, and I've seen it a lot, you know. Um, but knowing that stuff, like for a quality manager to know GD&T, to know the different types of tolerancing that you can have on a drawing, you know, whether it's limit tolerancing or upper or lower, you know, deviation. All those things are important, and also just even using measuring devices and measuring equipment. It's advantageous to know that because you want to be able to measure a part that a machinist brings you. And part of that is, you know, part of a quality manager's job is to interface with customers. And if you don't know
Interesting.
what you're talking about when there's a reject, it's very difficult to feel confident and to explain how something happened. It's so important for quality managers to peer into the world of assemblers and machinists and see the struggles that they have. You know, I've worked with plenty of machinists, and you go out there and you hear the struggles they have and how they overcome them, or you work with, or I've been an assembler, I've did some finishing, I've did that type of stuff. It's vital to know their struggles, because then you can go to the customer when there's an issue and say, well, this is what happened. And of course, going back to that lean thing, you don't have to pull all the machinists in to explain their struggle. If you know that what they're struggling with, then you can deal with the customer, just you yourself, and you don't have these other people not running their machines.
Right.
Um, and of course, the quality manager, they have to investigate a corrective action and they have to find the root cause. And having all that knowledge and that understanding can help you investigate that. It can help you come up with the solution, or what are you going to put in place so that it doesn't happen again, or even risk thinking before a project starts. So if you're a quality manager and you don't have that mechanical background or that experience, go out on the floor and spend a few hours with a machinist, or an operator, or the guy that's in parts finishing, filing burrs off, get to know what their struggles are. And even, I've met some quality managers that don't inspect parts. And to me, that's just crazy. It's like you're managing these people. You should know what they're doing. You should be able to do what your inspectors are doing. And it's definitely a thing that I see missing in the industry that needs to improve. And those quality managers can get you know you know on the floor training and from experienced people, and really understand that whole world. It's definitely important. Some people will say, well, doing CP studies or gauge R&R studies, that's an engineering thing. That's what engineers do. But I totally disagree. A quality manager needs to know all that stuff so that they can respond to a customer and
Right.
actually, you know, sound uh they can actually, sound like they know what they're talking about. And that's also good for a relationship with a customer too, when you can bounce things off of a customer. And you can, because some customers will come to you and ask for advice about measuring things. It's important, should we measure this restraint, or what datum should we be sitting on, or how what measuring tool you can measure this with multiple different measuring devices. What one are you using? Because we're using a CMM and you're using a vision system, or there's the whole, should I measure a circle in a CMM or should I use a pin gauge? There's all this stuff. So it's vital, I think, for quality managers to have that mechanical experience or background. Definitely.
That makes sense. Yeah, every time I see like a CMM or a quality report, I'm like, oh, this part's rejected. Like, why? Can you look at this? I'm like, I would look at the inputs first. Like,
Hmm.
what are they doing? Are they trying to measure a plane with 3 points and trying to measure flatness? Are they using the right fitting algorithm if it's a CMM? Are they trying to measure something with calipers that should be measured? There's so many, and I know a lot of
Yeah.
that is kind of, engineered in a process, but I always just wonder, like, where did the data actually come from?
Yeah.
And like you said, decision making is explaining that is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've also seen there be cases where um a quality manager may be measuring something, or an inspector may be measuring something, and they're like, well, this is out of spec. And then it's important for other people, or a quality manager, to say, well, let's use a different device and make a correlation and see if it's actually just the way we're measuring it, or if it is actually out of spec. So there's that experience too. That is something important for a quality manager to, if something is way out, the chances are it's either uh being measured incorrectly. First, that's the first thing I do is, are we measuring it correctly? Did I zero out the calipers, or is there dirt on the micrometer? But all those things make a quality manager better. And it's definitely a good thing to kind of have that. that mindset, you know.
Right. Yeah, makes sense to me. So next up, can I trust a company that is merely ISO 9001 compliant? Can you discuss the differences between certified, compliant, and partial?
So that was kind of the subtitle of my book, by the way. Here it is. I don't know if it's is it blurry? Yeah.
I can put it on the screen.
Yeah, that was the one of the things I one of the reasons why I wrote the book, why I adopt ISO thinking, is because there are a lot of companies out there that they are either um they're ISO certified or and they not everybody in their company knows what that is. They just know that they're certified. They don't actually know what it means. A lot of people can be like that. And then there's companies that just can't afford to become ISO certified, yet they will do everything they have to. They'll have procedures in place. They'll have a quality manual. They'll have paperwork. They'll have traceability. They'll have corrective actions, and they can call themselves compliant. But they're just they're labeling themselves internally that they're compliant.
Okay.
They get no certification, um, but they don't have. They're basically doing everything an ISO certified company does, but they don't have to make that payment every year for an auditor to come in. So they do all the work, but it's not as expensive. And some customers are okay with uh, suppliers doing work for them if they're just compliant. But be careful when if you say you're compliant, customers will could still come in and audit you and see if you are actually compliant. And then there's just the partial side of it. If you're a really small company, you got 5 people, it might not be worth even putting the work or resources into being compliant, never mind certified. But you can implement some of the things. Just one aspect of the ISO standard. For instance, maybe you're a small company and you do small internal audits, to find the holes in the company and fix them. And maybe that's the only thing you do that's ISO is those little. You have one guy that goes around and just checks that everything is kind of being done the same way and repeatability and where's their holes in the. Just doing that one thing can improve your on-time delivery or your scrap rate, and that might be enough for your company. But just doing that one thing can improve your company. So
And that's something you can tell your customers too. Hey,
yeah,
we follow this process. The thing you're interested in, we do that, and we can prove it.
yeah,
Um,
and
so,
sometimes that's born from a customer that a customer will come in and say, "Hey, we'd really like you to do this, and we'll give you some work if you do it."
right,
We know you're not ISO compliant or certified, but we like the work that you do. People have recommended you. Could you maybe implement, travelers or something simple? And
right.
maybe a company's like, yeah, we could do that. So, that's a good thing. So sometimes a company will take it upon themselves, or maybe it's you know suggested by a supplier, by a customer. So
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool that there's steps you can take. It's not just, all at once.
yeah. Yeah.
So what does it you've mentioned auditors a couple times and you mentioned they have to come once a year. What is it like to become certified?
Well, a lot of companies will use an outside service to, write their quality plan or write their procedures, quality manual, or write their procedures, or put things in place, mechanisms in place uh, that allow them to meet the standard. And maybe like I say, an outside service will do this. Maybe you have somebody within your company that can take that on. And it is a fair amount of work, but it doesn't have to be done immediately. It could be done over several months or even a year. Um, but the biggest obstacle I've found is trying to implement your procedures, implement your instructions. It's like that old expression, trying to teach an old dog new tricks. There's a lot of older ones, mature ones in the manufacturing world, and they've done
Right.
things the same way forever. And then when you come along and say, hey, we need to, document this. You need to write down, how many good parts you have, how many bad parts you have at the end of the day. I need you to tell me why this, part had an extra, step in it. Um, it's really hard to implement that stuff with employees.
Oh yeah.
But in saying that, it's part of why I wrote this book is it's so important to tell people and explain to people um, why we do this. Like the other day, I had a meeting with the people at my company about FOD and the importance of making sure parts aren't contaminated. And some people would be like, oh yeah, they just want clean parts. And it's you go a little deeper and you say, well, if there's chips in a bag that are on parts and the customer gets them, that could cause electrical problems
Right.
for the end product. So you go a little step further rather than just saying we can't have contamination. You tell them why we can't have the contamination. And then that employee can see the importance of keeping parts clean. And another thing is operators will be asked, how many good parts did you have today, or how many scrap parts did you have today? And the automatic thing they go to is, why are they asking this? Is my job on the line? Am I not good enough? And you need to explain to them, well, the reason why I'm asking you that is, if you're making 500 parts a day and this guy over here is making 600 parts a day. Uh, how can we change that? How can maybe you need more training, or maybe that guy that's doing 600 parts has better tools than you. So what tools can we get you so that you can increase your output? And it takes it a little step further, and it helps the employee, the worker, the operator to know why somebody is asking them these questions. And they don't put up a defense, but they actually see it's a way that they can improve and that they can help out the company. And if the company wins, then everybody wins.
Right.
So it's not enough just to say we're ISO certified and we need to do this and that and this and that. You got to tell them why is it important to do that. And then when we do internal audits, we're not the enemy. We're in the same team, and we're just trying to make the process more efficient or even easier for the operator and the machinist or whoever we're working with. So
Right. So two things. One, it sounds like it's not like getting some new accounting software where only some people have to deal with it. It sounds like it's a company-wide thing. Like no matter who you are, you're going to have to
yeah,
deal with this, which is
right.
which is interesting. A lot of things management might be doing are really going to affect people on the floor. So say a company gets all this stuff together, they spend a year or two, they hire somebody or do it themselves. How do you actually do you just hire an auditor to come look at your place and they stamp your paperwork? I've always been curious about this part.
Yeah, basically, auditors provide a service. There's a few out there, and they are approved by ISO, or they're approved by the American, Society of whatever it is.
Mhm.
Um, So they will come in and they'll look at the standard, and they'll try to see that if all your procedures are meeting the standard. So the standard might say you need good infrastructure, for instance. So an auditor would come in and say, well, do you have leaky roofs, or do you have fire extinguishers that are up to date? That's infrastructure, or people, resources. You have to meet all those different elements of the standard. And if they are satisfied, then you basically get a certification saying that you're ISO 9001 certified. And we didn't talk about this, but of course, when customers are looking for companies to make products, you know, ISO, if you like, has done a lot of the legwork to approve them or vet them. So now being ISO certified opens you up to
Right.
more work. bigger customers, maybe even different fields of manufacturing. Um, and then, of course, there's the other side of it. An auditor comes in and maybe there's some findings. Um, and yeah, I know it's scary. But what happens is if there's a finding, it can be a minor or a major, it can be an observation. You have a certain period of time to fix it. It's not like you're done and that's it, you're crossed off, you're put on the blacklist. You have 30 days to contain the problem. Then I think you have 60 or 90 days to actually fix the problem, and how you're going to move forward. Maybe you implement an adjustment to your procedure. Maybe you add a new procedure. Um, but what's important is, as companies, when we have an audit, they're making sure that we are, top level, that we're producing quality parts. And at the end of the day, as a company, we want to be providing quality parts, quality service. So we should be welcoming those audits as difficult as they can be. And I always say, if you're doing things the right way, and you're following your procedure and you're doing what you've written down, um, then audits they're a breeze. You're
Right.
confident in it, and it's very rare to get a really tough auditor that will pick everything apart. That's kind of rare, but it happens. But again, if you're confident in your system and you're doing everything right, then having an audit is just it's a good little check on everything. So
Interesting.
mm,
Yeah, sounds like a tough process, but like you said, it's kind of a seal of approval that you meet, a certain standard. So
yeah,
definitely sounds like it's worth it.
yeah.
So what you have a body of work of fiction, including one book that I purchased and read, Tales from Another Dimension, sci-fi short stories. What made you make the jump to nonfiction? And how many books have you written, fiction books?
I've written three fiction books, and then the most recent one is the Why Adopt ISO Thinking. I just seen. I haven't made a jump to it. I'm not going to not do fiction anymore because I love
Right.
fiction, but I just seen a need for it. I seen, colleagues at work or when you're doing an audit, they look at you with a blank face as to the kind of things you're asking them. A question an auditor would ask, or a quality manager doing an internal audit or something is, how do you know what you should be doing? And the people look at you like, I've been doing it forever. What do you mean? And I see that over and over and over. And I've also seen even CEOs or people that are outside of the quality department, are very confused at what ISO is, or those different techniques or the lean techniques that you can implement. So I wanted to uh, share those experiences and those thoughts in some way, and that's why I decided to write this nonfiction book. And it's not a huge book; it's only like 50 pages, but it will definitely have a huge impact on people. Everyone from CEOs to operators to the shipper and the receiver, all those people can benefit by reading this book and implementing in some way, whether it's top tier being certified or just one aspect or one element of ISO is definitely advantageous. But yes, I do prefer fiction.
Yeah. And I know you have other works as well that are not exactly book form. I know you write a lot, but I just wanted to
Yeah,
compare the number of, fiction to the first nonfiction.
yeah.
And I think your book, I read it. You can get it on Kindle. You don't have to wait for a physical copy. It seems to fill a niche. There's this 27-page ISO standard, which is basically unreadable unless you kind of already know what you're doing. And then there's textbooks. Like I have a 300-page textbook about implementing ISO or whatever. And it seems like there's not a good middle ground. And I think your book fills that niche and kind of not exactly conversational. It's a serious book, but explains things in a way that You're not going to get from the ISO standard, and it would take too long to get from a textbook. If you're just sitting at work, 400-page textbook, that's a lot.
Yeah, I again going back to the operators and the machinists, they have their expertise and they're good at it, and they don't have time or even have to read a whole textbook on ISO, and it can be boring. And so that's why I wrote this book. Is there's a lot of analogies in there, a couple of stories. There's a little bit of humor to try and I wanted to win operators and machinists over. That was my goal, and I open up the book by giving a little bit of my history
Right.
from being an operator, and doing those crappy jobs that nobody wants to do. I've done them all.
Right.
And so, but that's given me the experience to see all those different aspects and those different levels of people. And I wanted to kind of give them something so that they could get a gist of that whole ISO world without being bored to death with a textbook.
Right.
So that was kind of my goal in this book. And of course, I made it short because there's people out there that hate to read,
Right.
so they don't have time. So this is an enjoyable read, but they can also gain some knowledge that will make them a better person and also make their company a better company too.
So thanks, Robbie. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll put a link to your newsletter and a link to the book where we've been talking about right here. So thank you, everybody, for joining.
Great. Thank you for having me, Dean.